Thank you for taking the time to learn about some updates for the 2025-26 school year related to the Principal Act and APLDS program. That's the Alabama Principal Leadership Development System. So this meeting and this recording is really intended for district contacts, not for principals and APs. There'll be a different program orientation recording available to you to help you best understand these updates for the 25-26 school year. But really, what we're going to get into today with the district contacts are those processes behind the scenes to make sure that the program and stipend allocation done for this school year is handled in a smooth way and making sure we're all on the same page. All right, so I am going to go over a brief overview of the purpose of the law just because it's so new. So the law and APLDS program went into effect last year. Now we're going into year 2 of implementation this year. If you want to get into more detail about these different components, I recommend you take a look at that video intended for principals and assistant principals, because we're really just going to hit that at a very high level for this meeting. So I am going to go into some requirements, guidelines, updates, and then the deadlines for this school year. There were some legislative updates related to the Principal Act stipend for this past legislative session. We'll talk through that. And we'll also talk about the stipend eligibility criterion processes and that validation process to determine stipend eligibility for both the base supplement and the additional supplement. So we'll go through that information together. And then we'll talk about the importance of your role. Really, you are the key to all of this running smoothly across the state. Without your support and your guidance, this couldn't happen. And so I'm incredibly grateful for all that you do to support our school administrators during this process and the implementation of this new law and program, and keeping your folks at your district up to date with what's going on and any new information we may have. So we'll talk through what that role looks like for you, especially if this is your first year as an APLDS district contact, and then we'll talk through next steps and things to go ahead and start thinking about now and then later on in the school year. But we'll take it step by step as we proceed throughout the year. So I'm going to go over pretty much everything now, but as the year unfolds, I'll be sending out email updates, reminders, hey, these deadlines are due. So we'll take it step by step later on. All right, so the program. So when I talk about the program, I'm talking about the Alabama Principal Leadership Development System. The ultimate goal is to increase the effectiveness of our school administrators across the state of Alabama so that we're seeing those improved academic outcomes for each and every one of our kids, because we know that our school administrators substantially contribute to those positive student and school outcomes. So this whole law, this whole program is really designed to help support their professional and personal growth so that they can be the best school leader at their campus so that we can see the returns on these investments here. So how do we know if this program is working? So these are the measures of success that are outlined in the law. This is the data that we're required to collect every year and report to the legislature when they are looking at the funding. And so the first thing we'll be looking at are principal retention rates. So we'll be tracking that from year to year. I'll probably need your help. Make sure that the data are accurate and everything is being reported correctly. Another set of eyes will be a tremendous help for us to make sure that we have accurate data. We'll also be looking at school climate. So for this, we'll talk about those surveys that rolled out during the spring of 2025. For the first time, I'll show you where to find the survey items, how your folks can pull that survey data, but that's something that we're going to be doing from year to year around February, March, every spring. And then lastly, we'll look at academic achievement and growth. So this law really focuses on those 3 areas: school climate, achievement, and growth. And you'll see that reflected in the requirements for our principals and assistant principals as they complete their professional learning plan and very specific goals targeting those areas. All right, so when we talk about the program components, at the very beginning, a lot of us, when we were still trying to get to know and understand what this new law was, we were referring it to it as the Principal Mentoring Act, but really is a whole lot more than mentoring. That is one important piece to it, but there's so many other components involved to really make it a comprehensive system of support for our school administrators. So the first component were new standards. So these were developed by our design team and codified last school year. So our principals and assistant principals now have new professional standards. We also developed the Alabama Principal Leadership Framework. I'm going to give you just a little bit of a sneak peek of it and show you where you can find it. But I think it could be a very powerful tool to help our principals and APs deep in their leadership capacity and really have a solid understanding of the standards and the expectations of what quality school leadership looks like in the state of Alabama. And then last year, we did start that new principal mentoring program in partnership with class. Only a handful of states offer some type of mentoring program for 2 consecutive years. That's this structured. So I'm very proud that Alabama is among the handful. And again, this is just for our principals and not assistant principals. And this is for principals who are new to the principalship. So they're in their first and second year of the principalship, and they've never been a principal before. So they've never been a principal before at another district in Alabama or in another state. And then another piece of this is high quality professional learning from a state approved list. Something I want to lift up here is that that list is going to be updated yearly. So if you can make sure that your folks know and make sure that they have the most current state approved list, they'll be able to see 2025-26 state approved list at the very top to make sure that they're looking at the most current information. I'll show you where to find that. Now, the way this law is designed is that these different program components are going to be developed and implemented over 3 different phases. So over 5 years' time. Now, last year was year 1 of implementation. So that was rolling out phase 1. Now, phase 2 will roll out during the 2027-28 school year. And that's when we're going to implement the entire APLDS evaluation system. So we rolled out one piece of it last year for the 24-25 school year, and that's the professional learning plan. We've rolled that out in accordance to the law's requirements, but the entire system is right now currently being developed by our design team in collaboration with some national experts who have helped other states develop effective principal and AP evaluation systems. And so we're working on that right now. Now, eventually, the third phase is going to be a leadership academy, and this is going to be for our principals. It's very similar to Superintendent's Academy, if you're familiar with that. So our existing principals will go through this program, go through this academy for 1 year, and they'll complete it after 1 year. So it's a one-time type of program, but they'll need to complete it by 2029-30. That's when we'll start rolling it out in order for them to receive the stipend. Now, we may have a soft rollout before that, kind of a scaffolded rollout, just to make sure that we're not bottlenecking all of our principals participating in this leadership academy all in 1 year, the 29-30 school year. But we're still working to discuss those logistics with the design team and see what makes the most sense for our folks. And we want to make sure that we're doing this in a very good way. So stay tuned for that, but we're still in the process of developing that leadership academy. Now, the Alabama Standards for School Leadership, they can be found by going to the website alabamaprincipals.org. And if you can share that website with your principals and APs, that would be very much so appreciated. This is intended to be a one-stop shop resource, a website, so that you can find all things related to the Principal Act and APLDS program, including the new standards. So you'll see the language of, with these standards, the 5 domains of principal effectiveness. Now, that language is pulled from the law, and we know that based off of best practice and research that the most effective principals attend to these 5 different areas of leadership. So they not only need to be a managerial and operational leader, but they also need to be a visionary leader, instructional leader, relational and innovative leader in order to be considered effective. And so those are the 5 different standards that we now have in place for our principals and APs, those 5 different domains. Again, if you go to alabamaprincipals.org, click on the standards tab, and you'll be able to find that there. So that you know some language that we use. So there are 5 standards. So you'll see that's bolded. And then up under the standard, there are different indicators, and those are practices that help meet this standard. So we have 5 standards and then 30 indicators. Now, the framework, I'm so excited for this. This has been about a year's worth of work in the making. The design team did an incredible job, but it's grounded in those standards. And what they want it to be is they described it to be a playbook to equip, develop, and empower our school leaders throughout their career pathway. So if we're just starting out or maybe thinking about entering the field of school leadership, this is a resource for you all the way to the end of your career. The team really wants this to be a document that you can pick up and utilize. And so the word that I really want to lift up here is they want it to be a playbook. So you're not going to run every play, right? So if you want to firm up in the area of visionary leadership, you're just going to go to that section of the framework. It's not intended to be read cover to cover. You can find this framework on that same website, alabamaprincipals.org, and click on the framework tab at the top. I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what you're going to find. So remember, we talked about there are 5 standards and then 30 indicators. And so for each of those 30 indicators, there's going to be an indicator map to really engage users through this reflective process of considering, all right, what do I need to know and be able to do in relation to that indicator? So just like our teachers unpack those learning standards for our students, this is a resource that will unpack those professional standards for our leaders, for our aspiring leaders to retiring leaders. All right, then the next question that they'll consider and walk them through is, okay, well, where am I now? And then where do I want to be? So you're going to see a continuum of practice. There are 4 levels with different descriptors, and we're used to this in previous evaluation systems that we've had. The first level is emerging leader, then developing, effective, and transformational. So again, it shows those descriptors to help them think of, hey, where am I now as it relates to that indicator? And then, hey, what's that very next step? Where do I want to be? And then that critical question is, how will I get there? All right, so we're going to have in this framework, you'll find example strategies, evidence of growth, lots of different resources at their fingertips. And I think this is going to be one of the most valuable pieces that they find in this document. All right, if you want some ideas as the district contact about how to use this framework and move it from just a document to practice, you've got some ideas here of how it can be best implemented and how it can be utilized with your district team. All right, so another component is the Alabama New Principal Mentoring Program. So very similar to last year. Again, this is offered by the ALSDE in partnership with CLASS. The only difference between last year and this year is that last year it was only for newly employed first-time principals. So anybody who had never been a principal before and their start date was on or after July 1st, 2024, they were required to participate in this program or an alternative principal mentoring program that's been approved by the ALSDE. And we have had a handful of districts use an alternate program. So that is an option. But what's different from last year or this year is that those who participate in year 1 of the program are now moving into year 2 of the program. Then we're picking up our new folks. More information about the Alabama New Principal Mentoring Program with the materials and guidebooks, that's available at that website too, alabamaprincipals.org. The mentoring program tab at the top if you want to take a look. And I do, again, want to lift up because this can be a little confusing, especially since all of this is new, that this program is only intended for our new principals and not a requirement for assistant principals. All right, so if your district is participating in the program provided by the State Department in partnership with CLASS, we do have program orientation meetings happening next week. Here's a timeline of what you can expect next steps. So September 1st, starting then, CLASS will start emailing district contacts directly about your mentor placements. Then pretty soon after that, the mentors will be told who their new mentees are for the year, and they'll be asked to make that connection with them. Then we have 2 meetings September 8th. Now that's just going to be for year one principals, and September 11th for year two principals. Now, if we have anybody who's not able to make either of those dates, we prefer them to make those dates because that's when their mentor is going to be available and they can go ahead and start talking in person. But we understand that things happen. So there is a makeup orientation. It's going to actually be in person rather than a virtual makeup. And that information will be shared by class and their team after September 11th if it's needed. So if your new principal wasn't able to attend, they'll reach out to them and they'll give them some more information. All right, so I've already shared the program orientation meeting information with you, but if you just need a reminder and you just need to copy and paste that reminder to your new principals, year one and year two principals, you can click on the link here to this slide. It'll take you to a Google Doc where you can copy and paste an email reminder so that you can send that out to your folks. Now, high quality professional learning. So last year, there was just one tab on the website that included the state approved list and some guidelines. Hopefully, it will look a little bit more cleaned up for you this year. And for our principals and APs, it's actually been separated into two separate tabs just for readability and accessibility. So the one tab, there'll be one tab labeled 25-26 state approved list. And then there's a separate tab to outline those guidelines. We'll talk about some of those guidelines in just a little bit. But when you go to the state approved list and you go to that tab, you'll be able to, and your principals and APs will be able to search by professional learning type. So do we want more of an online or on-demand format? You can click on that tab. If your folks are currently in graduate school, there are some courses that have been approved for APLDS clock hour credits, so they can click on that tab and find more information. All state approved conferences are also in a separate tab. Now, they can also search by professional learning provider. So if they want to see, hey, what is MTSS offering? That's an area that I need support in. Let me see what was on the state approved list this year. They can search by that. You'll also find a couple things, and I'll point out later on more information for them to know who to reach out to in case they need some assistance and need some help there. All right, so let's go over some of these important guidelines. So the first that we'll talk about, again, this is a separate tab on the website, is to send a reminder that all credit for APLDS program in accordance with the Principal Act, to be eligible for the Principal Act stipend, has to be awarded through our statewide platform, PowerSchool PL. And the credit type has to be APLDS clock hours. So we started this credit type last year to make it easier so that you know and your folks know how many hours, how many APLDS clock hours they have that meets the requirements of this law. So we do have a new credit type. Now they can find how many APLDS clock hours that they have so far for each year by going to their transcript. And if they go to this tab, there are step-by-step video tutorial and directions of how to find how many APLDS clock hours there are. Now, I also want to lift up that they need at least 30 APLDS clock hours. It's okay if they have more, but the minimum is 30 APLDS clock hours. And this may be a little bit new information for your folks, but they have to be completed. There's at least 30 APLDS clock hours between June 1st until the end of May 2026. So that's June 1st, 2025 through May 31st, 2026. I also want to make sure I mention, if they're still not sure, does this count for APLDS? Does this not? Does this count for the 25-26 school year? Or was this part of last year? Tell them to take note of the naming convention of the course title. So anything that's been approved, one, it's going to be tied to APLDS clock hours. So it's got to be tied to that credit type. And then the naming convention will be APLDS-professional learning provider. And then it'll include 2025-26 in the course title. So that's how another way for them to know, hey, which school year is this going to count towards? And so we're going to do that for each year going forward. All right, so something else is that if it is on the state approved list, if it's a conference, there are deadlines for folks to register in Power School PL. So if they go back to that tab and click on conference, they're going to see another page that takes them to all the state approved conferences that will show them step by step directions. It's going to be the same directions and 1, 2, 3, APLDS clock hour requirements. This is what they have to do 1, 2, and 3. And it'll tell them the deadline for which they have to register in Power School PL in order for it to count. Now, this deadline is for a mega conference. That deadline is going to be different depending on what conference that they're attending. So if you can make sure that they know, hey, you need to make sure that you follow the directions in that conference link so that we don't unintentionally miss a specified deadline. Now, this is not new. This is the same as last year. So remember, the Principal Act is tied to the Literacy Act and also the Numeracy Act. So there's language in the law that elementary school administrators, now that includes both principals and assistant principals, need to participate in early literacy professional learning. That's if they have grades K-3 on their campus, and early numeracy professional learning if they have grades K-5 on the campus. So if you are going to that section on the state approved list, the 25-26 state approved list, going to that tab, and you're searching for a professional learning provider, there's a filter to the right that where they can select that drop-down box and say early literacy or early numeracy to see what's on the state approved list that meets this criteria. And this is something I mentioned earlier, more information. Let's say they need help. It's going to provide the professional learning provider contact information. It's going to say the name and the email address so that they know who to reach out to if they have any questions related to the dates, the locations. Hey, is there a session coming up? Or maybe after the fact, when are my APLDS clock hour credit? When is that going to be awarded? I will say this, back to the conferences, there is a blurb at the bottom that gives them a heads up of when they can expect their APLDS clock hours to be awarded. So sometimes our professional learning providers need a little bit more time to get into that platform and award all that credit. So for the conference links, for sure, it's going to tell them when they can expect to go back and check their transcripts in order to have their APLDS clock hours awarded. Now we have a lot of different offerings provided provided by the ALSDE. Lots of good stuff available to your principals and assistant principals. Vendors can also submit an application to be approved for a specific professional learning experience for the 25-26 list. And we know that you have really good, high quality professional learning going on in your district. And so there's an opportunity for superintendents or district administrators to also submit a request form to request that professional learning experience be award APLDS clock hour credit. Just as a side note, so think towards not business meetings. So if there are business meetings and sessions and where you're going over compliance and procedures, that's really not going to meet the standard or the spirit of high quality professional learning. That's the stuff they have to do anyway. It's more the compliance. It's knowing the deadlines and you've got to do this, that it's really not hitting that mark of that deep, high quality job embedded professional learning to take their leadership skills to the next level. So just a little tip if you're thinking about should we submit this or not. So you can find that request form. It's going to be submitted through DocuSign. There's a link for that where you can submit that request. And again, it's not intended to be submitted by principals and assistant principals. This really should come from district administrators. We're not going to review it if it's coming from a principal AP. Let me tell you why. That's because we want them to run it by you first. We don't want anybody going rogue and just wanting to go to this conference in Hawaii and try to get APLDS clock hour credit first, for that. You as the district and the evaluators y'all are the ones who are providing that guidance and approving and overseeing that professional learning and what's most appropriate for them. And so this is a way to make sure that that communication is happening so that they're getting that feedback from y'all to see if, this is a good route to go and this is some professional learning that they should participate in. All right, I always like to give you a heads up of what's coming. So I just want you to also be on the lookout. We have some landscape surveys that will be going out pretty soon. There's 3 different ones, a survey for superintendents or the designee, a survey for principals, and a survey for assistant principals. We're really trying to get the heart at, hey, what do you guys really want to know? Like, what's the most important skills or areas for us to discuss so that we can make sure that we're developing those high quality professional learning opportunities around around those needs that you say you have and around those standards. So which of these different areas in the standards and in the framework do you need the most support in? So we can make sure that we are meeting that need. We also want to know what is the process and what is that experience with you receiving feedback. And so that's a critical part of a really good and comprehensive evaluation system is that you're getting that feedback so that can inform practice and you're seeing that professional growth. So we know that there are some good things happening across the state of Alabama and we want to know about it. So if you have really good evaluation practices in place already, we want to learn from you. And I say we, I mean the design team, and these are the partners we're working with, Dr. Matt Clifford and his team at West Ed, and that team has worked with other states to develop evaluation systems. So they're helping support us in this work. And we really, really need your help in promoting those surveys so that we can make those data-informed decisions that are going to have an impact for the evaluation system that's going to be rolled out by 2027-28. All right, so speaking of the evaluation system, the way that the law is set out, remember, it's going to be rolled out in different pieces. Now, there's lots of different puzzle pieces that go into having a good and meaningful evaluation system that's going to have an impact on professional practice. And so those pieces are rolled out in phases. And so by last year, we had the PLP and we had that feedback piece. And then it's not going to be until 2027-28 that we're going to roll out those other pieces. Remember, that's what we're currently developing with the design team and why we need your input on that, rather. So we're working on those other pieces now. But this is what we have in place for the professional learning plan that went into effect starting last year. And so this is language, again, pulled directly from the law because we focus on growth, achievement, school climate for overall program evaluation purposes, but also the individual PLP level. So our principals and assistant principals are required to have at least one goal related to growth or achievement or both, and at least one goal related to school climate. Now, we know that there are indirect measures of school climate like discipline and attendance, but the most direct measure we know of in the field of school leadership that really gets at the heart of measuring school climate, it's going to be really that perception data. So I'm going to talk to you again about those surveys and how those can be, that data can be used to develop those PLP goals for this school year. And then that plan for high quality professional learning from that state approved list. Now, this process is not new to any of y'all or to our school administrators probably, but as you're engaging in the professional learning plan, engaging in that process throughout the year, you're going through these different phases, these different cycles, and it's really just school improvement here. First, you're starting off, hey, and thinking about where are we now? But where are we now in relation to those 3 areas? Growth, achievement, school climate. So really digging into the data to then determine what are our most critical needs, what are our top priorities, so that we can know where we want to be. And that's when we're going to develop those targets and those SMART goals. So we'll get into that in just a little bit for this slide. Again, how am I going to get there? So that's now when we're operating with 2 different improvement plans, and they really should be nested together. We have the PLP, the professional learning plan for the principal and assistant principal, and then we have the Alabama Continuous Improvement Plan, the ACIP. So that's your school improvement plan. So I have my professional learning plan and my school improvement plan, and it really makes sense to have those different plans aligned and making sure that we're streamlining that focus for our school administrators. Now, then that critical piece is throughout the year, we're going to monitor our progress. Are we making progress towards implementing our plans as designed and making progress towards meeting those goals? But a critical piece too is, hey, if we're not, this adjusts as needed, right? What's working, what's not, and so that we can make sure that it's not at the end of the year and it's too late to have that meaningful feedback and making those adjustments along the way. And then at the end of the year, of course, we're going to evaluate effectiveness. Did we meet those goals? Did we implement the plan as we were intending to have it implemented? So that in the framework, in the appendix, uh, you're going to see lots of resources. And again, you can see here a screenshot, lots of different hyperlinks too. So if you want to see directly what those items are, you've got that linked. Here's an example for you. But this one I want to lift up in particular in the appendix. It's reflect on past, present, and future needs. This can be a really good protocol for you to work through with your folks and determining that step. Where are we now? Again, where are we now in relation to student learning, so achievement and growth, and then perception data, looking into school climate. So I've noted that page for you in the framework if this is a protocol that you want to use with your folks this year. And another protocol that you can consider when you're thinking through that first question of where are we now, it walks you through similar questions of what we talked about with that cycle and some considerations when setting those goals and even some examples. You'll also see this on the alabamaprincipals.org website. There's a tab at the top that says evaluation system, some examples, but please know that we offer guidance that it is at the district level. You guys are the ones who are approving those goals, approving those plans, because you know what the needs are of your school administrators and you know how to guide them to best support the work that you're doing in the district. So we have some guidance, we have some examples, but we're always going to defer to y'all in this process because you're the ones who are working directly with them and know what's most appropriate. All right, so talking about the Alabama School Climate Surveys. Now, we do have a new school climate model in Alabama. It's modeled after a national model that we had in some surveys available from the U.S. Department of Ed. And so this is what is measured in those new school climate surveys that are going to go out every spring, so around February, March. So when it talks about school climate, we're talking about how different stakeholders experience the school. And it measures three big buckets, three different domains. So you have engagement, safety, environment, and then up under that you have additional topics. And so each of those survey items are aligned with these big buckets, but also those subtopics too. Now, where can you find step-by-step directions? And where can your principals and APs find directions for how to pull that data to develop those school climate PLP goals for the 25-26 school year? You got it. Go to alabamaprincipals.org. There's a tab at the top that says School Climate Surveys. It'll provide video tutorial and step-by-step instructions for how they can pull the data from spring 2025 to set those goals. And if your folks want to learn more about this new school climate model and need a little bit more additional support and been able to look at that survey data in a meaningful way to develop those goals, we are offering this year 3 online asynchronous courses, and they're worth 8 APLDS clock hours each. So that's a good chunk of the required number of APLDS clock hours required for this year. The 3 represent each of those 3 different domains of school climate, those 3 different buckets. So I just wanted to lift up that opportunity that's offered to you all, to our principals and assistant principals, free of charge from the ALSDE. Now let's get into the technical side of the evaluation system. Now this probably, if you were a district contact last year, probably looks familiar. There are 4 steps to the evaluation system that principals and APs needed to complete. Now there's an additional step starting with the 25-26 school year. So Step 3, certification of stipend eligibility. That's new, and we'll talk through that. So let's review step 1. It's the same as last year, except the options are slightly revised. That's when they're going to select their school administrator position. So if anybody is an assistant principal, they have one option. They're going to select that top choice. And if anybody is a principal, they're going to fall into one of two categories. They're either a new principal, so they're in their first or second year of the principalship, and those folks have already been identified. You've been coordinating efforts with me to make sure I have them on my list. So they're either a new principal or they're not. They're an existing principal. Please make sure you remind them to select the correct option because it's going to filter to the components of the evaluation system they should be completing based off of being a new principal or an existing principal. Now, this is the same. Step 2, professional learning plan. All right, so to the right, you'll see that there's an optional feature, participate in discussion. This is where if you want your folks to upload their baseline data related to their student learning data or their perception data to say, hey, this is why we selected the goals that we did for the 25-26 school year. That's an option for you, or they can engage in dialogue with their evaluator back and forth about setting that PLP. That's optional. But what's not optional are the APLDS goals. Again, this is the exact same thing as last year. So your principals and APs will either select the for growth goal or achievement goal or both, and then everybody will have at least one goal related to school climate. Now, some guidance we offer is to keep this really simple and clean and just have that SMART goal. We also recommend to really try to not have more than 3 to 5 goals total overall, just so that they're doing less with a greater focus. But again, we defer to y'all to what that looks like for them this year, specifically, especially rather until we roll out the full evaluation system with more training and guidance for you. And then they'll have an opportunity to list their plan for professional learning. They'll have a link to the current list for the 25-26 school year. And this is where they're going to say, hey, from that state approved list, this is what I plan to participate in. But the other critical part of this that I really hope you lift up to them and encourage them to think through is, what is their expected evidence? Not that they're going to have attendance records and it's going to reflect on their transcript from PowerSchool PL, but what is the expected evidence that demonstrates application of their new learning? Because this whole program, this whole law, this whole experiment is contingent upon not just them sitting in a session and just collecting the APLDS clock hours. The whole point is that they learn and then they apply their new learning to improve their practice. If they don't have that application piece, then none of this is going to work. We're not going to see the return on the investments that we want through those stipends. So really push them to think through, well, okay, how are you going to show that you're actually applying this new learning? Now, a couple questions we had come up during last school year was, all right, so what happens if that session that was canceled, ended up, they weren't able to attend? Do we need to unlock the PLP? Do we need to go back into the platform again, which is through AIM, that TE application, open it back up and revise the PLP? And the answer to that is no. The deadline for all that to be completed is October 1st. Please encourage your folks to put some effort and thought into making sure they develop a plan that's very intentional and strategic. However, we do know that plans change. So let's say that they're not able to attend something. What they can do is just capture that in their evidence. There's a section for high quality professional learning, and they can just make a note of that this was the shift that they had to make. All right, certification of stipend eligibility. Now, your folks may be seeing a message in the AIM-TE application that this is going to be opened up pretty soon to them. I'm really thinking it should be coming up very soon. I'm thinking within a week that this is going to be opened up to them. So this step 3, this new step, will not unlock until they complete step 2, their PLP. So once that is available and pushed out through the platform, this is a sense of what it's going to look like. I'm just going to show you some snapshots here. But the person who's being evaluated, we're going to collect some evidence on them. So we're going to call them the evaluatee. We're going to get some experience for them. How many years of experience and things like that, positional changes. Remember, we're trying to track a lot of that data as part of a requirement for our legislative reports. And then they're going to have an opportunity to have a program orientation. So there's going to be a video provided to them and making sure they really understand those requirements that I discussed earlier. That's on that professional learning guidelines page about being an elementary school administrator, and you've got to have early literacy or early numeracy professional learning. You understand it has to be completed by these dates. And so just really some attestation statements to make sure that they understand what the requirements are and that everybody is successful in meeting those logistical and procedural requirements. So that's not a barrier to their successful completion of the program and being able to receive the Principal Act stipend this year if they meet the eligibility criteria. So that's really the purpose of this right here. Then the other part of why it's called stipend eligibility, the certification of stipend eligibility, is because we want them to have an understanding of what the eligibility criteria are for the Principal Act stipend. So we did have some really heartbreaking conversations at the end of last year, or June, July, when some folks were reaching out to us because they're seeing their colleagues go ahead and get the Principal Act stipend paid out to them, but they didn't receive the stipend, and they thought they were eligible when in fact they weren't eligible. So we really want to avoid that situation where they don't realize they're not meeting the eligibility criteria. So it was communicated in a memo. It was on our FAQs for that website, but just another layer of support for them to make sure that they understand what the criteria are. So here are some examples. They have to hold a valid leadership certificate in Alabama by October 1st, 2025. Have to make sure that they are assigned at their staff position for Principal AP, not serving as an interim. So here are just a few things. I'm going to get into the details in the weeds with you all as the contacts a little bit more later on. So bear with me, but just to have a sense of what it looks like for them. And again, it's going to be set up in a dynamic user experience. So if they select yes, like I do have a leadership certificate in Alabama, it's going to take them to the next question. If they say no, they may be prompted to say, well, you may not possibly be eligible for the stipend for this year. Please seek further guidance, but it's okay to go ahead and complete the evaluation system, even if you're not eligible for the Principal Act stipend. So it's going to be a dynamic response depending on whether they select yes or no, just to give them a little bit more feedback. And then their evaluator is going to come in and have a similar process to make sure that they understand what the stipend eligibility criteria are for the individual who they're evaluating. Now, step 4, evidence, looks the same. So that's when they're going to put in their evidence of making progress towards their growth or achievement goals. They can upload evidence. They can also engage in a discussion. So that's available for them. There's also, let me bump back a little bit. There's also a box for, a text box for their school climate goals, and also a box for high quality professional learning. We had a lot of questions. Hey, Anna, what type of evidence is supposed to be in that high quality professional learning box? Remember, that's when they're going to go in and say, this is the evidence to demonstrate application of my new learning. I would also recommend that they go ahead and pull that transcript from PowerSchool PL to demonstrate at least 30 APLDS clock hours. Again, at the very end of the year, they can upload that. That's just going to be easier for the evaluator to go ahead and take a look at, and make sure that they have at least 30 so that they can attest to that assurance. But here for the high quality professional learning, that's evidence that demonstrates application of their new learning, and then their uploaded transcript. So I would recommend both of those. I would also recommend go ahead and adding evidence monthly or quarterly, and then they're not going to hit submit until the very end of the school year when they're ready to close everything out. Certification of completion, that step is the same as last year. So that's when the Principal AP is going to go in and say, I hereby certify I have successfully met our program requirements to receive the Principal Act stipend. Or The second option, hey, I was eligible to receive the stipend from the ALSDE, but I did not meet all program requirements. So maybe I only had, you know, 28 APLDS clock hours. And then the third option was I was not eligible to receive the principal stipend from the ALSDE, but I did complete the evaluation system, and that's okay. And then the evaluator is going to come in and make the same statement, select the same option. Please make sure your folks that the option that's selected is the same between the evaluator and the evaluatee, because if not, we're going to have to reach back out to you to make sure that that matches. Because when we're looking at stipend allocations and getting at the end of the year, making sure, hey, these folks are going to actually receive the stipend, what we're doing is literally pulling that data from AIM-TE, what has been selected in this step, and we're seeing, hey, what did the principal or AP select, and what did the evaluator select? One that has to match. Two, and the second thing, we're looking to see if that first option is selected, and if not, we're going to have to push it back to you, because then otherwise they wouldn't be eligible for the principal act stipend. And then the other piece of data that we're pulling for each individual who was eligible for the principal act stipend, that's going to be the number of APLDS clock hours for the 25-26 school year. So we'll be looking at how many of those APLDS clock hours have been awarded between June 1st, 2025, and then the end of May, 2026. And I do want to note too, if you can share this with your folks, if you go to the tab for professional learning guidelines, and it gives directions for pull transcripts, I do make a note of how to add those filters that starts off with June 1st, 2025, so that it gives them an accurate total for this particular school year. So I think that tip would be helpful. All right, so upcoming deadlines. All right, so steps 1, 2, and 3 need to be completed by October 1st. That's the same deadline as last year. Now, at the end of the year, that's when we're going to have 2 separate deadlines, and we've got school administrators in 2 different categories. One category is going to be your school administrators who are retiring at the end of the year, and then those folks who are not retiring. Now, if somebody is retiring at the end of the school year, they need to have the rest of the steps, that's 4 and 5, that's the evidence and certification of completion, no later than May 1st. Then they need to reach out to you as the district contact to say, hey, I'm retiring at the end of this year, and I am done. Can you reach out to, and you would reach out to me and say, this person is retiring. Can you go ahead and pull their data from AIM-TE? Remember that certification of completion data, and then APLDS clock hour data from PowerSchool PL. Can you go ahead and pull their data and start processing the stipend allocation? And we'll do that. We'll go ahead and process the stipend allocation for individuals who are retiring, and we can knock that out in May. We just need to know. So just need to make sure we know. And the reason why we have an earlier deadline is because we've learned that it does count for retirement. And so the only way that this additional bump, this principal act stipend, will count towards retirement, the highest average 3 years in the last 10 years, is that if they get that stipend before the retirement date goes into effect. So that's why we're going to process those sooner for everybody. So I actually just talked a couple of weeks ago, one of our mentors for new principals, he just retired and completed this program last year. And he said, Anna, that made a difference of about like $170 in my check every month of getting this stipend. So I was very excited to hear that for him. And so we just want to make sure that we follow all the processes and procedures so that they can take advantage of that opportunity for their retirement. But hopefully we're not going to have a whole lot of folks who are retiring, because one of the things we're hoping for is that principal retention. So years and years down the road. Now, the other folks who are not retiring, we're going to process everybody else in your district as an entire group. All right, so everybody has to be signed off and certified for us to go ahead and process. And so the deadline is no later than that 3rd week of June. And that's when we typically do our other deadlines for data to make sure it's all firmed up. However, we highly recommend everything be completed in May. And for you will probably have a different internal deadline to make sure that everybody is completed ahead of time. And let me tell you why we recommend you go ahead and do it sooner. is that if you go ahead and reach out to us before that June 19th, 2026 deadline and say, Anna, our district is done. We have all of our folks who they are certified and signed off. Can you go ahead and start pulling the data? I'll go ahead and do that. I'll go, but I won't know unless you tell me. I won't know to go check sooner unless you tell me. So you gotta let me know. I'll go ahead and pull all the data that's needed and start working on that stipend allocation form that's going to be sent through DocuSign to CSFOs and superintendents. So that's why we say, hey, if you can go ahead and get that knocked out in May, we can go ahead and start processing that sooner. And just know that the evaluation system, yeah, we're having some updates, particularly with that step 3. The dashboard is going to look a little bit different with it having 5 steps instead of 4. So as soon as I have that available to me in our Stage platform, so that I can see what those different steps look like, I'm going to be working on video tutorials and screenshots just like last year. So just let your folks know that's coming. And then I failed to mention that last year I sent out to y'all, if you were contact last year's checklists, that really walked, step by step video screenshots, to make sure that we have wrapping up at the end of the year that we've taken care of everything that needs to be taken care of. There was one for school administrators, one for an evaluator, one for your superintendent, one for y'all, one for CSFOs, to really just make sure we're ticking it off and we know all the steps that need to be taken to have a successful year. Well, the feedback I got was, hey, Anna, can you have that at the beginning of the year rather than just the end of the year checkoff list, something that I can be checking as I'm progressing throughout the school year? Absolutely. So I'm working on that as well. I'm just waiting on that new information from the evaluation system to be able to post. All right, let's talk about the Principal Act stipends. Okay, so we got Principal Act stipend, and then we have 2 different types of supplements. So this is pulling language from the law. We've got the base supplement, and that's for those folks, principals and APs, who are eligible for the Principal Act stipend and who have successfully completed all program requirements. So that's up to $10,000 for principals and up to $5,000 base for assistant principals. And then you have the additional supplement. And you see the people there in the pyramid because it's really intended to be an incentive to recruit talent to hard to staff areas that experience barriers and challenges, such as high poverty or low performing. Okay. And so it really should be a targeted effort to recruit those folks, and shouldn't be that many people who are eligible for the additional supplement. That was the spirit and intent of this additional supplement. Now, the amount for principals is up to $5,000, and then for APs up to $2,500 if you serve a high poverty or low performing school. Now, what's changed with the legislative updates is how high poverty and low performing has been defined, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But once we ran the original criteria in order to be eligible for the additional supplement, almost 80% of our principals and assistant principals were eligible for the additional supplement. So it looked less like a triangle, more like a rectangle, and that was not the intent of our legislators. It really was to incentivize folks to go to those hard to staff places. And so they really wanted like 30-40% to be eligible for the additional supplement. So that's why we have this new legislative update to really better reflect the intent of the law and how this program was designed. All right, so what's changed in the past legislative session? We now have a new and updated and specific definition of an assistant principal and a revised definition of a principal. Now, what you see in that last column to the right, that's in red, those are the changes with the new statute. A key phrase that I want to point out is that last bullet for our APs and principals that says includes CTE building administrator. So building administrator is a key phrase, or alternative school administrator at a standalone facility. A standalone facility is also a key phrase right there as well. We'll talk about how we're going to capture that information from superintendents and CSFOs in a little bit. Now, this is what I was talking about, how the definitions changed for high poverty school. So no longer does it include CEP. The language reads at least 75% direct cert of free and reduced percentage. And then low performing school Now, that will only include comprehensive support and improvement school. It will no longer include our TSI and ATSI schools. So CSI, TSI, and ATSI, those are our school designations based off of accountability. It will still include our priority schools. So those are our schools with a DRF in the report card. And they will no longer include limited support schools, but only include full support schools as defined by the Literacy Act and the Numeracy Act. So if you want a copy of these changes, if you go to this line, you click on that visual, you'll have access to a handout for you. All right, so you've heard me talk about some of these DocuSign forms. If you were contact last year, the two of these forms are very familiar. But again, everything was so new, so I'm going to walk you through it as a reminder. But we do have a new form that's about to be rolled out within the next couple days. That's called the Certification of CTE Alternative School Administrators. So when you go to the slide and then you click on that visual, you'll see a preview of what the form looks like. So if you want to go ahead and give your superintendent and CSFO a heads up. But this goes back to that question of, well, how are we going to know which of the building administrators are at a student loan facility? Well, you're going to tell us, and you're going to tell us through this form, which again is going to be sent through DocuSign. And then we'll talk through the timeline a little bit more in a minute. But then around December-ish, that's where we're going to pull together all the data and say, hey, here are your folks who we're seeing based off of our data are eligible for the Principal-elect stipend. And then you'll take a look at that. And then at the end of the year, we'll say, all right, based off of those who are eligible, these are the folks who are going to receive the stipend allocation because they've successfully met all program requirements for the year. So the official communications are always going to be through forms, through DocuSign. So district contacts, you all are going to be CC'd a copy when it first goes out. Now, if I have more than one district contact, it's going to go to the first contact listed just because DocuSign is not going to be able to have two people in that lineup for that item for two folks to receive the copy. It's just going to be able to send it to one person. So you as the district contact, you're going to receive a copy. You can't edit. But at the same time, your CSFO is going to receive the editable copy where they can complete the form and fill out. And then once they sign off, the signing order is then going to go to the superintendent to review, sign, and then submit. All right, so let's go over the eligibility criteria. Okay, so there are some guidelines we have in place. This is very similar to what we had last year. The guidance was provided through a memo. We'll do the same this year. And then we walk through the eligibility verification step. So we're looking at other data to say, all right, you are in fact, meeting these guidelines to be eligible for the base supplement. And then I want to let you know what data we're pulling from. All right, so the first guideline is that their school administrators, they have to be coded as full-time principals or APs, and those financial records that are submitted to the ALSDE the third week of October. So what happens is that our amazing finance department, they pull this information for us. They pull that data, those financial records, and they give us a list. And they say, all right, here are your list of full-time principals and APs for FY26, or for whatever school year. So we'll take that list. That's going to be our starting point, is the data that they give us. All right, then we're going to look at your responses that you submitted through these different DocuSign forms. And then we're going to take a look at what your folks are saying in the APLDS evaluation system and making sure, hey, they are, in fact, they're saying they're full-time. Okay, so we're going to pull all that information, all that data together. That's our step one. Okay, and then we're going to take a look at that next guideline, which says school administrators are employed as full-time principals or assistant principals. They have to be in that position by October 1st of 2025 to be eligible for this school year. So how do we know if they're in that position by October 1? You're going to tell us. You're going to tell us through that stipend eligibility form. Remember, that's not going to go your way. Head your way as a copy or sent to your CSFO to sign and then to your superintendent to sign until around December, because we need time to get that initial data from our finance department to then add these other layers of data to it and then to send it out to you all nice and cleaned up. All right, third guideline, School administrators have to be assigned the correct staff position in the education directory. So, as a principal or an assistant principal, not assigned as superintendent or assistant superintendent, because that is our best mechanism at the State Department to track what is somebody's current position. We also want to make sure that they're at the right location. And just as a side note, that their email address is correct. That's not going to impact their eligibility, but it's just going to be really helpful to make sure all that data is accurate right now. And so we're going to pull that data directly from AIM portal and go to that EdDir application. All right, and then the next guideline, I said this earlier, that they have to hold a valid leadership certificate by October 1st, 2025. And so if you have any questions about what does it mean, what are the valid leadership certificates, we've received this guidance from our education certification section. So that's listed for you. And then we're going to pull that data from TCERT and say, hey, do you have a valid certification or not? Okay, next guideline is that school administrators have to meet the definition. Remember, we had a definition, I'm going to go back to this, of principal and a definition of assistant principal. So an example that you see for AP, that third bullet, assists the principal in managing and leading the school. So what does that look like? Some examples given are overseeing day-to-day schedule, operations, supervising teachers. So how do we know if your folks meet the law's definition? You're going to tell us. You're going to tell us in those different DocuSign forms, and we're going to take a look at it. Now, remember, our principals and APs are also going to tell us when they're doing the APLDS evaluation system. So that's something. So they'll have that level of understanding too. Now, the next guideline is that if somebody is serving in an interim position, unfortunately, they are not eligible for the Principal Act stipend. So we're going to know that information from those DocuSign forms as well that are completed. And then they have to serve in that position for the entire school year. So it's not, the way this doesn't work is not going to be a situation where somebody will reach out to you and say, all right, you know what? It's April. I'm just going to go ahead and take it to the house. I'm just going to go ahead and retire. I'm going to go ahead and resign. But don't worry, I've already completed all the steps in the evaluation system. I've already done at least 30 APLDS clock hours. I'm just going to go ahead and retire earlier. Unfortunately, they are not eligible for the Principal Act stipend, because remember, part of this is to keep our folks and to retain them in that position, especially for the rest of the school year, to maximize their impact at the school. So even if they complete all program requirements, they're not going to be eligible for the stipend unless they finish out the school year with the kids. And so there's going to be an attestation statement at the very end when we get ready to roll out the stipend application form. It's going to say, hey, I understand that they have to stay in that position for the full year. Now, here are the data sources we're looking at for the additional supplement and the criteria. So the first is, that's that high poverty. So we're looking at official student attendance state collection data. So that's information that's shared with us. That's, not something that we have access to. We just get to know the total, the final numbers. So we have some great folks who support us in pulling all this data together for us. We are going to use the fall 2024 designations for CSI. So you'll see a hyperlink here so that you can see the list of schools. So if they're on that list, they would know already that they're at a school that's eligible to receive the additional supplement, if that individual meets all the other eligibility criteria we talked about for the base. The priority schools list, that's linked for you as well. Those are identified based off of the 23-24 school year. And then for limited support and full support for the literacy ads and numeracy ads, we get that information from our partners at OMI and OMI, and it's going to be based off of their list from the 24-25 school year. Now, we really need some help with this. Oh, we desperately need your help in helping us with this communication piece. When we are working on that stipend eligibility list, oh my goodness, it was over half of our folks. We had to clean up the data. It was just data integrity issues. That's all it was. It was just inaccurate reporting. So this will be a much smoother process. Please help us make sure that we have the correct data so that we are correctly identifying those who are eligible for the principal-elect stipend for this school year, because we would hate there to be any data entry error that hinders them from being eligible to receive the funds from the ALSDE. So we saw a lot of things. Now, this is not my lane. This is us working closely with the finance department. So the feedback we've gotten from them, just incorrect object codes or FTE, or folks not being submitted in their LEAPS reports that are required to be submitted in October. So they've provided a resource for us. If I'm sure your CSFOs already know about, but there's an accounting manual. So if they have any questions, your CSFOs or folks have questions about that, they can reach out to our great finance department, and they'll be able to provide them current further guidance. We can't, because that's not our area of knowledge. So we don't want to offer any guidelines there, but our finance folks definitely can. So in EdDir, this is something you as a district contact, you can go ahead and be doing now, is again, checking those staff positions, making sure that's correct, making sure that the correct school. Sometimes the staff position and the school didn't match between the LEAPS report and EdDir, and automatically, the way everything was set up, it just kicked the person off the eligibility list. So all the data has to be accurate and match. And so there's a help guide for EdDir if you're not familiar with that source. And then one of the criteria is also making sure that our folks are full-time administrators, remember? And so we will be looking at Power School to make sure that nobody's teaching classes. If they're a principal or assistant principal, they're not teaching classes during the day. So if you need support, there's a link that Stacy Brochure was kind enough to share with me. So that's linked for you too. So let's recap what's required for the 25-26 school year. So these are the program requirements. If somebody is eligible to receive the principal-elect stipend, this is how they're going to get it. So they need, again, recap at least 30 APLDS clock hours. Those dates are June 1st through the end of May 2026. They need to complete all steps of the APLDS evaluation system. Last year, we had 4 steps. Now we're moving into 5 steps. And then if they are a new principal, so they're in year 1 or 2, they have to complete a state-approved mentoring program. We offer one in partnership with class, but then some districts have opted to seek approval for an alternative mentoring program. But all folks who are year 1 or year 2 principals are required to successfully complete the mentoring program in order to receive this stipend. And I just want to give you some insight as to the other data that we collect, just to track the success of implementing this program. And so we can see some trends over time. Here's overall data at the state level. We also track it by LEA, but we did have 2,927 principals and assistant principals who were eligible for the principal-elect stipend last year. I mentioned this earlier, about 80% were eligible for the additional. Again, that range should be around 30-40%. You see the total stipend amount. So that doesn't include program costs either. So it's pretty substantial amount, but I think it's well worth the investment. We just have to show that this whole program is working. If you hear our legislators talking about the program, it's not intended to be an entitlement program. You just get a supplement just because you're in the position, right? It's intended to be an investment. So please just keep pushing that message of, let's embrace this as an opportunity to deepen our professional practice and growth and move the needle in the right direction, and not just from a place of compliance, of check the box and pick up the check. That's not going to get the results that we want. And there's a lot of accountability and a lot of eyes on this to see what's working, because again, it's a pretty substantial budget line item, and there should be, right? If our folks are going to invest this much money into this program, we really should be showing that the efforts are paying off. So if you can just help support that message with our folks, we'd appreciate that. Now, we did have a program completion rate of 98%. Hopefully, we'll bump that even more. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, remember those 3 different requirements for program completion were the same as last year. So that's APLDS clock hours. So 98% met the requirement of at least 30. 99% met the evaluation system requirements, so they completed all 4 steps. And then 100% of our folks who were identified as year 1 principals successfully completed the state approved program. So if you've not heard this lately, please know you are valued and appreciated, and this could not happen without you. You are incredibly crucial to the success of this program. And I know that your school administrators are grateful for you as well. So, what does that role look like for you? How can you best support them? So, we're asking that you communicate that information that we're sharing with you, like today, with your school administrators. Keep your superintendents or your colleagues up to date on this information. Some examples may be making sure they know we have new standards, making sure they put their eyes on that new framework, that new resource available to them, that they know that there's a new state approved list for professional learning for this school year, that there's been some updates for the evaluation system, what those program requirements are for this school year, what those new legislative updates are, and then just communicating that stipend eligibility as we go and collect more data and we firm up that eligibility list. Also, if you can remind school administrators of an upcoming deadline. So keeping in mind too that those deadlines, like the PLP is October 1st. That's not just a deadline for the principal AP to complete their PLP. It's also the deadline for their evaluator to review and approve and sign off on it too. So you may also need to update the evaluators of those deadlines. All right, if your school administrators or your district folks have any questions or concerns, if you can serve as that liaison, listen to what those concerns are, and then reach out to us if we've got. If you're not quite sure, please do. That is why we are here. If you don't feel helped and supported, then I am not doing my job. So please don't hesitate to reach out if your folks need something. We are happy to help. We know that this is just another responsibility on top of your already full plate. So we're just so grateful to you. If there's anything that we can do to help ameliorate that additional stress or burden for you, but you just please let us know. We're there for you. And if you can also keep me posted on changes in your school administrators, I know that we have some updates throughout the year. So if you let me know updating EdDAR, then I can keep that stipend eligibility list up to date. So just thinking in terms of timeline and what we're kind of leaning on you for at different times of the year, just that ongoing communication. In August, you really helped me with identifying who those year 1 and year 2 principals are. So that should be done and complete and finalized at this point. September is going to be a pretty heavy month with a couple of things, and then it's going to taper out a little bit, but that new form for CTE building administrators and alternative school administrators, that should be going out soon. So you'll be CC'd a copy to that, and it'll be sent to CSFOs and superintendents. So if you'll give them a heads up of what that is and that's coming, when those video tutorials and screenshots and the user guide and all that's ready for that additional step 3 in the evaluation system is available on the website, I'll let y'all know so that you can share that out. Again, I'm going to go back to that data accuracy and making sure that all the information are correct in the EdDAR portal and in PowerSchool. Remind folks about that October 1 deadline. Once that October 1st deadline has passed, I'll go in and I'll pull a completion report for steps 1 through 3, and then I'll send that to you in a spreadsheet just so that you can take a look and see who all has successfully completed the steps. Now, remember, this is not the stipend eligibility list. Okay, so this is probably going to get to you sometime October. We don't even get the financial records from the finance department and with our list of folks who are full-time principals and APs until the first week in November, usually. So just because I just want to give that heads up, there's a little bit of confusion last year of me sending that list, and I did not do a good enough job of clarifying. So I want to do that now. That's just going to be a completion report of what's been completed in the evaluation system, not the official stipend eligibility list. Remember, all official communications like that are going to go through DocuSign. I'm going to go ahead and start working on this fall preliminary principal retention data from year to year. And so I may need another set of eyes on that, making sure my data is not wrong, because again, I'm a big believer in data integrity. So if if you have the chance and opportunity, that would be a great help to me. In November, like I said, we'll go ahead and get that data from our finance team, and then we'll start pulling in all the other data, and we'll send that stipend eligibility form through DocuSign. Now the springtime, so it's going to be kind of tapering off after that. Maybe just kind of some ongoing reminders, make sure you're adding evidence and things. But closer to the spring, where we're wrapping up the year, and that's going to be when, if you can remind school administrators that they need at least 30 APLDS clock hours by the end of May. That's when we're going to also make sure we're communicating those two separate deadlines for those who are retiring, which hopefully we don't have any, and those who are not retiring. This is a critical thing. In order for me to pull the data early for your retirees, you have to let me know. So please encourage your folks to effectively communicate with you so that you can let me know. We can go ahead and get that processed in May for the folks who are retiring. And then if you've got everybody else in your district who's certified, you're ready to go, also if you'll contact me. And then once I've pulled the data, then our team will start working on the stipend allocation form. So it'll in the form what we did last year, and I don't anticipate too many changes. It'll say the total stipend allocation amount and relate benefits related to the employer portion of benefits will also be included in that, and then it will be itemized for the individual, not by benefits, but by base supplement or additional supplement, how much they should be getting. So I also want to put in a reminder here that if those funds are used by the district, if you can reach out to our LEA accounting, that great team, Brady can help them making sure we're returning those funds. If we provided more funds through the benefits, if that can be returned. All right. And again, I just want to end with thank you. This work cannot happen without you and your incredible support. And I hope you know that we are here if you ever need anything. We hope you have an amazing rest of your day.